Welcome down to my 9-foot homemade oak bar. Pour yourself a cold one. You are listening to Bucs in the Basement. My name's Chris, and Craig here is the biggest Pirates fan you'll ever meet. Let's talk Pirates baseball now. Welcome to Bucs in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
Broadcast basement studio has gone offline. It has crashed, maybe because of the lack of moves and the frustration surrounding the Pirates management not making that many moves for the past couple of weeks here. But in all seriousness, what this means is that you're going to get an episode filled with just Craig as Chris works diligently to get everything back online. If I sound a little bit different, it's because I'm recording on my remote studio equipment, which consists of a fairly cheap, maybe $100 to $150 computer and my $19.99 Walmart mic. If I sound the same, that just basically means that us podcasters are spending a little bit too much money on our equipment. And with the upgrades in technology and the increased technology, that just leaves the door open for more stuff to go wrong. Anybody that does podcasting, any other podcasters that are listening to this out here, know what I'm talking about with all the glitches and just little problems that we experience upgrading equipment, adding stuff to it. It definitely becomes a little bit of an issue. But just tell me if this sounds, the same. If it does, you know what? Like I said, maybe we're spending a little bit too much money. What this also means, other than just getting me for this episode, is that, Chris and I had to scrap kind of what we had planned as a little bit of a back and forth for this episode. So I kind of threw some stuff together this morning based on, what's been going on around Pirate social media with the optimist point of view versus the pessimist point of view, the polar opposites, the polarity that often exists on social media. And I broke it down into two parts, and those two parts, it's easy to break down. It's how a lot of episodes are broken down, is focusing on, the pitching side of things, the rotation, as well as the bullpen with specific players, and then also moving to the position player side of things, maybe something that they're doing defensively or a combination of that with the hitting. Because, obviously at this point in time during the offseason, we really don't know what the team is going to look like until they actually step on the field. A lot of times teams can look really good on paper, adding a bunch of players. We saw it with the San Diego Padres last year, not only spending a ton of money, but also adding, all-star level caliber players, having a Cy Young pitcher. For better or worse, if you don't like that he pitches, only about 5 innings and goes through, the order about twice, some guys can't even do that. So, that's maybe just a luxury for some teams. And we've also seen teams, on paper that don't look so well, that kind of like outperform, and end up, going further into the playoffs, like the Arizona Diamondbacks. Obviously, the Miami Marlins ahead of schedule last year. But I figure we might as well just get this started because we saw Marco Gonzalez pitching out at drive line, doing a bunch of different things. There's also a catcher out there who was using his, bullpen time or his workout time with Marco Gonzalez as, his framing and pop time and different stuff like that. But, Marco Gonzalez is throwing a baseball. So I wanted to break this down into like the positive side of things and then the negative side of things, like the way that this can be looked at. Because like I said, during an off season, you're pretty much, it's all you can really do, because until somebody steps into the batter's box, you don't know if the tweaks they made on their swings or, the good second half of the season that they had is going to, propel them, or if, somebody ended on a slump, they could come out and start things off hot because of something they did. But on the positive side of things for Marco Gonzalez, people are looking at it, can he return to form? Can he be the type of pitcher he was? And especially in 2021, looking at his stats, he had a 3.96 ERA, a 1.17 WHIP. Moving on to 2022, a 4.13 ERA and a 1.33 WHIP. In comparison, the Pirates ace last year, Mitch Keller, a 4.21 ERA, a 1.25 WHIP. He would end up being, one of the probably one of the two best pitchers on, the staff in the rotation for the Pirates if you, supplanted those into the 2024. Obviously, that leads, right into the negative aspect of this. It's the nerve injury, not getting any younger. Will there be any regression? And I feel like Pirates fans have a little bit of a PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from the Jarlin Garcia injury. Seen as a pretty good signing for the Pirates last offseason to put in the bullpen, a nice lefty, but then was a guy that got injured and then couldn't even hold a baseball for the rest of the season. So, Marco Gonzalez, you don't know what you're going to see, but, there are some positive things to look at. He's not a guy that throws super hard, so you're not looking, for him to regain that velocity. The velocity really wasn't a part of his game to begin with, but that nerve injury is something to be really scared of. Moving on to the next pitcher and moving to the bullpen, going to go with David Bednar, and everybody knows that I am nice to David Bednar at times, love David Bednar, but also become, frustrated with him at times. On the positive aspect for David Bednar, the one thing to look at is that, last year he topped out career high in both B-WAR, Baseball Reference WAR, and also F-WAR, Fangraphs WAR, 2.5 B-WAR, 2.3 F-WAR, just signed, for avoiding arbitration, to $4.51 million. First year of arbitration, you have him under team control at least for the next 2 years. I know there has been some talk out there about the team, possibly looking into an extension. Nothing really has gotten moving in that direction just yet, at least nothing that I've, heard of that is legitimate. It's just a bunch of people thinking, should they do this? Will they do this? Obviously the Pittsburgh native part of it kind of plays into that. But on the negative side, it's always like, what David Bednar are we going to get? When David Bednar is good, he is really good. When David Bednar is struggling, when he maybe starts to wear down, maybe there is some overusage in there. Because we look at it, in April and May, last year, he was used kind of like how a, normal closer would be used. He was used, a couple times a week in those close games when they had to use him. Then you look at the slump that the team hit in June and was just basically being used, out of necessity because, you can't just have him sit there for too long, wasn't getting very many save opportunities. And then, kind of like it would have been like in July, I believe it was. It was just pretty much like there was a save opportunity. It seemed like every other day, sometimes a couple days in a row. Maybe saw a little bit of overusage there. So, some of these numbers, you can maybe take with a grain of salt, but they kind of like of what they've been, throughout his entire career. I looked at his career splits and looking at, would you get, April, May, and August David Bednar? In April, Chris and I always look at the whip for, if you're going to be like an elite closer or an elite reliever, you're looking at those guys that go below the 1.00 whip, especially down towards like the 1.900. In April and May for his career, April, it is a 0.835 whip, May, a 0.837 whip, and then in August, the dog days of summer, a 1.138 whip. That's kind of getting into just like a good, but those are still good numbers. That's like a good reliever. But then when you look at June, July, September, October, in June, a 1.385 whip. July, a 1.274 whip, and then September, October, because you know that you go into a couple days in October now, a 1.217. The 1.217 you can kind of deal with if you're not looking for, elite levels of performance, but it's not really going to, maybe justify that extension. And as the arbitration goes up, you look at it, already up over 4.5. Next year you could be looking towards, 7-8 million. The year after that, around like, 9, 10, 11 million. Is he really going to be, that effective? Because we talk about, the finickiness of relief pitchers is that, the guys that make the Hall of Fame are good for extended periods of time, but for the most part, relievers, it's like 2, 3, 4 good years at most, and then you kind of see a drop-off. Seeing as we're in the bullpen, kind of want to stick with that for these next two here. Last year, Carmen Mlodzinski came up, and I think he performed fairly well. I don't want to start out with the negative here, but I think that because so many of the Pirates rookies came up and struggled, that maybe his performance looked a little bit better than it actually was. But kind of with the positives here, the big positive is, the 2.25 ERA. And like I just mentioned, I looked more towards whip, but a lot of baseball fans, especially if you look on the broadcast now, they don't use a ton of the advanced stuff. They really stick with, Ks per 9 is getting a little bit more advanced, but they'll be like, okay, this is this guy's ERA, this is how many innings he's pitched, and then you go a little bit of the Ks per 9 and the walks. But, if you want to go to the negatives, you can go straight towards the walks there. He was walking 4.5 batters per 9 innings. Obviously not great. A 1.278 whip. Once again, you look at somebody who you want to be a starting pitcher, and if the whip's around, a 1.300, you're looking at a guy who's like more of a middle of the rotation arm. If you're looking for a guy that's in the bullpen, once they start going towards that 1.3, you're looking for a guy that, you may not even want to be in your bullpen. And then, an advanced metric kind of thing here. the 4.03 FIP, which would kind of show may have been a little bit lucky with that ERA. Maybe, had some good defense behind him. So, for Carmen Mlodzinski, obviously a rookie, did see a lot of good things from him. But, that's another one where there's really just kind of that question mark where people are saying, and this has been said for like the past like 2 or 3 off seasons. It's like, man, this bullpen is really shaping up, and man, this bullpen is really coming together. And, in the beginning of the season, when usually the pitchers are ahead of the batters, then it's like, okay, they're really putting things together. But then, when stuff starts to fall apart, then it's like, is this really, a well put together bullpen? Gonna have to see how that plays out. And the same goes for Ryan Borucki. And man, I kind of like Ryan Borucki. He's the guy that when all the guys got tossed from the game because supposedly Haynes or Donnie Kelly or somebody said something, and then Derek Shelton came out and argued, Ryan Borucki's at the top of the stands, and I've already said this should be made into a t-shirt. And he puts his hand up and he's like, I said it. I'm the one that said something. The guy's got a decent amount of attitude. Avoided arbitration with him very early, even before, when you had to tender the contracts. $1.6 million this season. The positives for him last year in 2023, you had the 2.45 ERA. 81% of the people who were on base when he came into a game, he left on base. A 0.74 whip. That's elite level whip. A 350 FIP. So, not, so far apart, but maybe just a little bit. But then you look at, Ryan Borucki's history and the 2 best seasons that he had before arriving in Pittsburgh were 2020 in Toronto and also 2021 in Toronto. In 2020 in Toronto, he had a 2.70 ERA, 84% of the base runners left on base, but a 1.44 whip and a 3.61 FIP. I don't like that whip. FIP is kind of where it was at before, so that's maybe along the same lines, but maybe he did get a little bit lucky there of not letting so many guys score because that whip was getting very high. The next year in Toronto, a 4.94 ERA, only 69.6 left on base. A little bit better of a whip, a 1.23, but that's really, borderline, like I said, for a guy that you may not even want in your bullpen. And a 5.66 FIP, which basically means he did not pitch very well. May have found something in Pittsburgh. Going to have to see what that plays out to be. Will definitely be, used. They showed they trusted him last year. Was able to perform very well, so maybe he unlocks something. We're just going to have to wait and see. And speaking of waiting and seeing what will happen, another guy, Paul Skeens, on the positive side, number 1 overall pick. Number 1 pitching prospect. Best pitching prospect since Strasburg. We saw how well he performed at LSU. Came with a lot of hype. I know that we didn't get to see much of him in the Pirates system, but there's just so much positive stuff in the pedigree, kind of behind him. But then there's the unknown. There's the, with any pitching prospect, the tin snap. There's no such thing as a pitching prospect. The injury concerns that come with pitchers. The injury concerns that come with pitchers in the Pirates system. And then also, I'm just going to mention this. A lot of people talk about the shape of his fastball. I've looked at a bunch of different things, and it's really inconclusive because a lot of people are saying, if he can, if he has that control, if he has the command on the fastball, the shape won't matter as much as long as the velocity stays the same. And then there's other people that says, it doesn't matter if it's flat, it's going to get hit all over the place. So that might be just kind of that unknown and a little bit, of a negative going into that. And I usually do things in 5s, but I did have a 6th one for the pitching. And I kind of call it like that little bonus here. And for the bonus is, the unknown, once again, kind of maybe overusing that word. But what is going to happen with Quinn Priester, Roansy Contreras, and Luis Ortiz? And I keep them kind of bunched up into the same group because of, the experience in the majors, but also kind of like the youth movement. I mean, if you look at it, their ages, Priester, 23, Contreras, 24, Ortiz, 25. But then you see the negative in the velo down across the board. And I mean, especially I think when I talked about the PTSD with the Harlan Garcia, I mean, with Roansy in 2022, we saw him come up a 3.15 ERA, a 3.41 FIP, a 1.27 WHIP. I mean, there was so much hope for him going into 2023. Saw him as a complement to Mitch Keller in the rotation, that things were, finally coming together. And what happens? A 6.59 ERA, a 5.19 FIP, a 1.57 WHIP, down to the minors, down the whole way, pretty much kind of shut down to Bradenton to rework everything, back up to Indy and into the bullpen. And that's where, there's just so much of an unknown. There's so much that we can't even, really know what's going to happen with this pitching staff, with the rotation. And the other negative that I'll just kind of throw in there is, please, Ben, please add somebody. If you ever see me out and about in Pittsburgh, you will always recognize me, and not just because of the white beard, but also because of the Y that is always on top of my head, the hat I always wear. The Yins brand, proud partners with Bucs in the Basement. 3 dynasties, 1 brand, Yins. Finally, 1 brand to rep all black and gold. Follow @ShopYins for new merch drops and giveaways. Order online at www.shopyins, the emphasis on the 2 Z's, high quality comfort, lightweight materials, a new modern look for the black and gold, made for Yins by a Yinzer. The problem when I do these episodes by myself, and I notice this when I do the minor league news and brews by myself as well, is I get extremely long-winded in what I have kind of outlined as the first segment. So not going to try to speed through this, but we're 30 minutes of Bucs here. So I don't want to go too much over that. Usually as long as it's under 35 minutes, we'll be okay. Kind of see what happens at that. But we're going to move along to the hitters, the polarizing hitters themselves. First in line, Ke'Bryan Hayes. And for anybody that's listened to this show, from its inception, back in 2019, it's not that I haven't been a Ke'Bryan Hayes believer as far as how he's going to perform with the bat. I've just always been, erring a little bit more on the cautious side just because of what I've seen, from him throughout the minors. Of course, he comes out in 2020 and just, absolutely destroys the baseball, hitting to all fields, and looks like a perennial all-star, possible MVP candidate. Suffered some injuries over the next, and dealt with some injuries over the next couple years, but I mean, a lot of people say Ke'Bryan Hayes, and this is a positive here. Number one, he won a Gold Glove. Number two, a lot of people say, he only had a good last month or so of the season. I think they kind of forget what he did in June before he was injured and was out in July. Because from June on till the end of the season, across 305 plate appearances, he slashed 307, 334, 528 with 13 home runs, good for a 127 WRC plus. The one thing from this time that I had to put in the negative category was his 4.3% walk rate, which is not great, for a guy that you want to see performing, to a higher caliber level, especially when you saw, that K rate creep above, 20% at 21.6%. Also looking to see what he did in April and May. He had a little bit better of a K rate, only 17.3%. Walk rate a little bit higher at 6.8%. But, I mean, he had like 220 plate appearances, and he slashed 221, 273, 348 with only 2 home runs, good for a 65 WRC plus. I still think that his I guess it would be finding that water level is somewhere in the middle. I don't think he's as bad of a hitter, obviously, as he was during the first couple months of the season. I'm not sure if he can maintain, what he did over the last few months of the season. But, I mean, all in all, Ke'Bryan Hayes is just a good ball player. So, I mean, hopefully, it doesn't bottom out the way that it did last year and maybe finds some middle ground. Speaking of bottoming out, the ups and downs, the ebbs and flow of a season, Jack Suwinski. Jack Suwinski is probably one of the more streaky hitters that I've ever witnessed while watching baseball, and I just basically went through his what his OPS was month by month for the season. In April, a 1.011. In May, a .730. June, 772. July, up to 903. Jack, maybe you're turning things around. Nope. August, 529. And then September and October, 848. For the season, a 32.2% K rate. But on the positive side of things for Jack, the one thing I will say is that walk rate, showing more patience at the plate, 14%. If your K rate is going to be up above 30, your walk rate has to be up above 10%. Jack did that very well. Good for 2.8 FWAR, a 115 OPS on the season. And to tell you the truth, he only had 2 months where his WRC plus was below 100. That would be May when he had the 730 OPS. He was at 98. And then obviously in August when he had the 529 OPS, he was down at 55. In the other months, March and April, it was 163 WRC plus. June, 110. July, 136. September and October was 133. But then maybe also in the negative thing is looking at his splits. And as we know here, guys, if anybody's watched Jack play, Jack does not hit great against lefties. I think it improved throughout the season. But on the season, he had a 608 OPS, 41.7% K rate, and a 68 WRC plus against lefties. On the flip side, against righties, he had an 856 OPS, only a 29% K rate, which down below that 30. So, I mean, it's good. The 127 WRC plus. I don't want to see him as a strict platoon bat. I'm hoping as he gets older and as he matures, there's something that can come out of this. Maybe seeing more lefties, maybe avoiding the tough lefty. I don't know. We're going to have to see. But, I mean, Jack is still young, only played his first full season. And, yeah, once again, I've said probably a million times this episode, gonna have to see how it plays out. And this guy right here, the next one, Henry Davis, in the negative. I went with negative first on this one just because catching ability, development. In the minor league news and brews segments, go back and listen to it. Had a decent amount of scouts on, people who actually saw him play in person, talking about his catching development, saying that, he was behind in the catching development. Some of that due to injury, some of that not, due to that not really being the focus when he was, a catcher at Louisville. I mean, they were more focused on the bat. The Pirates, even they were more focused on the bat. They drafted him for his bat. But negatively, the bat didn't come to play. 255 plate appearances in the majors. /213, 302, 351, a 653 OPS. Did have 7 home runs. But, I mean, man, he was on fire in AA and AAA last year. 250 plate appearances, so kind of breaking it down half and half for the year. /306, 454, 561. That's a 1.015 OPS with 10 homers. I think the bat will come around. You have to hope that the bat will come around. And for these next 3 guys, which kind of lumps into 4 and 5 here, because I usually break things down into lists of 5, is Liover Peguero, Nick Gonzalez, Jared Triolo. For Liover Peguero and Nick Gonzalez, on the positive side, you have the potential, the youth, the pedigree, the defense that we saw. Definitely thought they played a lot better on defense than what I had seen in the minors. With Liover Peguero, a positive, 7 home runs and 213 plate appearances. You extrapolate that out over a full season of at-bats, I mean, you're looking at least 14 to 18 home runs on the season, but then also, for both of them, Liover Peguero, his K rate, 31.5%. Nick Gonzalez, 28.1%. And then the walk rates, Liover Peguero, 5.2%. Nick Gonzalez, 4.7%. And right now, it looks like these guys are going to be the ones to battle it out at second base. I've said before in previous episodes, I honestly still wouldn't mind them going out and getting a veteran second baseman, not Adam Frazier, but a veteran second baseman to actually, let them, develop instead of putting their feet to the fire. I know you have to find out what you have, but from the beginning of the season, I'm really not so sure. Jared Triolo I put in there. Obviously, go with the negative on this one first. Everybody talking about the BABIP. The batting average on balls in play, 441. Obviously, by history, by any advanced metrics, unsustainable. But, I mean, I also looked at his BABIP, in the minor leagues. 2021, it was 358, which would be above average, because the average usually comes in around around 300. In 2022, it was more towards the average at 333, but still an above average, BABIP. And then in 2023, a 411 in AAA. So, I mean, I don't know. And then, you go to the positive side. 2.1 B-WAR last year, 1.7 F-WAR. And then I also looked in the minor leagues at the weighted runs created plus, where it's okay, his BABIP's high, but he's always been a consistent hitter. I mean, look at the WRC plus in 2021, it's 128. 2022, it's 121. 2023, it's 120. He's always been a consistent hitter. I think he will hit in the majors. I know that some of that is going to come down a little bit. I know that will bring the average down a little bit. They did make some adjustments to add a little bit more power. So maybe, he'll still have a good eye at the plate. He'll still have good contact, but maybe add some power to get that slugging up so the OPS kind of stays reasonable. But the guy on the biggest positive, could be a starting third baseman on this team if we didn't have a guy named Brian Hayes, and could pretty much play everywhere all over the field. Plays, second base, probably is next in line, then go over to first base, shortstop, and he can play some outfield, and that's something we haven't even really seen yet. I don't know if I want them to do that. Would like them to just kind of like focus on maybe the infield utility. But, honestly, we're going to have to see how that bat develops in the beginning. And then finally, trying to wrap things up here, like I said, once again, getting a little bit long-winded for our bonus. Brian Reynolds. In the minus category here, and if this is a minus, it's not a very big minus. Brian Reynolds is a good to great baseball player. I don't know if he's at the elite level. In 2021, we did see that. In his 26-year-old season, the .912 OPS, the 5.9 WAR, the 6 F-WAR. But then in 2027, and in his 2022, in his 27-year-old season, we saw an 807 OPS, drop down to a 2.9 WAR, a 2.8 F-WAR. In 2023, 28-year-old season, just this last year, a 790 OPS, 2.4 WAR, 2.3 F-WAR. What is his 29-year-old season going to bring? And then the other part I saw as a negative is the walk rate for him going down year by year. Going again, 2021, 11.6, 2022, 9.1, 2023, 8.3. He's adding some more power, which is going to go on the positive side because I have that as a positive, is the sneaky good power. But is he sacrificing some of that approach at the plate for the power? But I'm going to go with the positive there. In 2021, his ISO, it's just basically like the isolated power that he has. It was a 220 with 24 home runs. 2022, that's a 199 ISO with 27 home runs. 2023, a 197 ISO with 24 home runs. And the biggest positive is he is locked up. He will be here. I think he'll be a consistent player. I don't know if he'll ever rebound back up to that 0.96 WAR, but he's going to be a consistent player. He's going to be here. And hopefully Chris will be back here next week so we can have our little back and forth that we wanted to have this last time today to kind of talk about that. Hopefully we got everything situated. Once again, let me know how the mic sounds. Maybe we're spending too much money. Maybe not. We'll see.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say